years has been shifting from talking about parking to talking about transportation demand management. So really allocating better use of the spaces that we have, and not necessarily talking about building more parking, but how do we better utilize parking that we have and shift that demand so we can still maintain parking and its availability. We are a 7-day-a-week operation. Circling back and closing the background, again, this item to convert parking to the DDA began as a resolution in 1991. At that time, I did not live here, but it's my understanding that downtown had some blight, and it felt like mutually exclusive. It was in the best interest of the DDA to oversee some of the parking, revitalization, new developments, as they had a better grasp. At that time, there was no transfer of employees, property ownership, contracts, and there was still the enterprise fund, and all parking fees and revenues still came out of the fund. In 2003, that was the first contract that was initiated between the city and the DDA, and that contract started with just employees of the parking structure. So at that point, if you think back 20 years ago, it was not mobile payments, credit card payments, it was heavy on cash, and it required cashiers. Over the years, since 2003, we've had many amendments, and they've included the Parking Violations Bureau, Ramsdale Gate, increased maintenance responsibilities with the addition and opening of the Old Town parking structure, and then most recently, the phase 1 of residential permits, and we are looking into moving forward with phase 2. So that's kind of how we got here today with discussing the parking contract, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Commissioners, any questions?
Sure.
Go ahead, Jackie.
First off, thank you, Nicole, very much for being here. As a newbie commissioner, I appreciate the background information very much, so thank you. I also, as the rest of the folks on the commission know, I had requested some more in-depth analysis and information about the financial aspects of the Parking Services Department, and was struggling a little bit to reconcile some of the projections through fiscal year end versus budget versus some information that had been prepared for the commission. And so I do appreciate that you got back to us so promptly on that. I wondered, when I look back a few weeks to when this conversation began, I think we came to a conclusion that we were trying to figure out, as part of this process, and answer questions like, what is the operational impact? What are the costs going to be? Is there a detailed timeline available? And I just wondered if, in terms of this handoff from DDA to city, whether any progress has been made on filling in those blanks.
Yeah, so I think that at this point, the question is, whether or not the contract will remain, or whether or not, it will be executed to issue the 30-day notice or 60-day notice. And so at this point, parking will continue to run, whether it be under the DDA or whether it transitions to the city. If there is a component of that 60-day termination clause being executed, at that point, there would be some negotiations and conversations with Christine, the city's Human Resources Department, and what that transition would look like for the employees. And then as far as the budget goes, the budget is coming before you, which will include the parking budget next month. And in that budget, again, the operational expenses for the employees currently are in 801, which is a contractual line item. Should the employees revert to city employees, they would just move into the 700 category, which is staffing, salaries and wages and benefits. So it's not going to change from an operational standpoint. It's really going to be where the reflection of staff wages reflects in the budget.
Okay. And so please, I think Liz maybe has some insights about
Right.
the process.
So, I mean, at this point, city administration and the DDA are looking for direction from the city commission. So, in the last page of Nicole's memo, I mean, the next steps would be if the city would like to terminate and take back parking, then, that would need to be an agenda item at a upcoming meeting. And then that would, there'd be a 60-day clause, but I know that we would work with the DDA to make sure that we figured out a timeline that was mutually beneficial for both organizations, keeping in mind that there are staff here, and we want to make sure that we can clearly communicate with them what those changes might look and feel for them. And then, again, if the city commission were to exercise that termination clause, then human resources would work with our union representatives to make sure that we have homes for those employees within the city. City administration would work on a transition detail. So, not to put the cart before the horse, at this point, we are prepared. We've got the steps lined up that we need to take, but we're waiting on commission action to start those.
Okay, all right. And undoubtedly, this is going to come up as part of the budget review process, that cycle.
Correct.
Thank you. I have one other question,
Please
but
go
I
ahead.
defer to the rest of the folks on the commission.
Please go ahead.
Anyone
Well,
else?
yeah.
Okay. Help me if I've gotten these numbers wrong. But as I was reading the annual summary, I guess it was a six-year summary, it looked to me as though parking revenues for this fiscal year, 23-24, are projected to be about $1.6 million, and in the prior fiscal year, they were about $3.3 million. Do I have that right? Have they dropped that dramatically, or am I misunderstanding?
Are you referring to attachment A?
Yes,
And you're looking at the 23-24 projected?
probably, yes, because we don't have anything for
Okay.
23-24
So the-
other than the budget.
So the projected revenues are estimated to be roughly $2.6 million. So that is fairly in line with where we landed at the end of fiscal year 22-23. And it is up because the numbers provided were COVID years, so 20, 21, and 22. So as I look at the attachment, it is up from 20, 21, 22, and in line with last year.
Okay, I think actually I was looking at the more complete financials that broke out fund by fund and then provided a summary, and I think this was reviewed at the Mobility and Parking Advisory Board in early February, and
So those,
For-
I can speak to that. So
Yeah,
those
go ahead.
numbers, they did include pre-COVID, because we've been doing a lot of comparison prior to the pandemic. That's when we implemented the Transportation Mobility Demand Management Study. Because at that time, if you were downtown, we had staff literally on the sidewalk, moving cones back and forth, letting people in. It was very much booming downtown, if you will. And so there was a constraint at that point on the system, and we were trying to figure out ways to shift processes and procedures in order to, use underutilized spaces. So at that point, the revenue was much higher than it is today. We're now in post-COVID. If you look at the office vacancies downtown, they are higher than they were in 2018-19. And so we are projecting based on the new norm from what we've seen since COVID. So yes, the numbers that you have from that meeting were pre-COVID, which were much higher.
okay, all right. So I'm a little surprised that we're looking at fiscal year 2022-23 as sort of a COVID influenced. Is that what I'm hearing? Or are you saying that the COVID impact was earlier?
It was in 20, 21, and 22, so 23 is really kind of our new benchmark and what we consider to be post-COVID. So all of the numbers that we've compared to pre-COVID, we would like to get back to those numbers because there was much more revenue at that time. But at this point, we're using 23 as our new benchmark for revenue and projections going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
My question, and I think it's something shared by part of the public at least, gets to the structure and like the organizational chart. And like, I don't even know, I could look it up, who is your boss currently, and who would your boss be if city takes parking back? And like the Mobility and Parking Advisory Board has been mentioned, do you envision a similar subcommittee housed over here versus over there? Like, what organizational chart and structure do you envision?
Sure, so
And maybe
I'll
this is
start
a
with
question
question
more for
one.
Liz.
She can answer first part.
Yeah.
She
Well,
knows
who's your boss?
Yeah, who's your boss? So currently, my boss is the CEO, or interim CEO, Harry Burkholder.
Okay.
Formerly CEO Gene Durenzi. And so that's my direct report. And then the office, field, and maintenance report directly to me. So, and then the DDA has their own staff that are specific to DDA items. As far as the transition to the city, that is to be determined. I think at this point, it might be Liz. However, under other circumstances and reviewing everything, it could be different. As for the question of the Mobility and Parking Advisory Board, that is a subcommittee of the DDA. So it's to be determined again if that's something that the City Commission would like to create. I know that through process, right now I work through the Traffic Committee. A lot of the items that I bring before the Traffic Committee end up being vetted, going to the Planning Commission, and ultimately end up here. At some point, they've also been blessed by the DDA. So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, for committees. There's also opportunity for the public to, hear and see parking. So it's just ultimately up to you if you'd create a committee.
Right, so, I mean, I didn't want to put the cart before the horse, but ultimately, I think parking would report to administration, at least to start, probably for at least a few years unless another department was determined to be a better fit for that. The DDA does have a parking and mobility committee. That wouldn't, translate over here, but the city commission could create an ad hoc or create a committee. Or we've also got internal committees that maybe we could change the structure of to include this. But that's all certainly flexible as we move forward.
Okay, thank you.
And
Yeah.
that doesn't mean necessarily that parking would answer to this committee. You don't currently answer to that committee, right? They
It's advisory.
provide advisement, much like the planning commission and the
So we
relationship with
do-
the planning director.
Yeah, we do take quite a few items to the Mobility and Parking Advisory Board. I think that it provides the public an opportunity to come. They are public meetings to anything any items on the agenda, they're welcome to speak to. Ultimately, then they come from the Mobility Advisory Board to the DDA Board and then to the City Commission.
I think we would actually be reducing layers here. We would have the appropriate layer, but not so many that Nicole's giving the same presentation to 5 different bodies before getting approval, I think. I think the goal
Yeah.
here is to streamline.
Yes, that's the word I was going to use. Make it easier for everyone.
Any other questions from the commission? Go ahead.
And my other, it's more longer-term request, it's not a question for tonight, but I'd love, if it comes under the city, to have some more information about the depreciation fund, the $5 million in interest, just, again, maybe what your thoughts are, like when should that be revisited, given current costs, and if that really is meant to be a 50-year thing. I mean, I know it's hard to look in the crystal ball, but maybe 2 years from now is time to hire an outside entity to say, hey, no, you really want to have 10 million in there, or whatever it might be, but to at least look at that. And I really appreciate that you put it in here so that we get that it's not, like where my background is, depreciation means you're setting aside funds so you can buy a new one when that thing dies. And that's not what this is. So I greatly appreciate that it's made clear to the public that we're not building up a war chest to build new ones when these are done in 50 years. So thank you.
And just to comment on that, I do agree. I mentioned to the DDA Board that I think that in the next couple years of budget, we really need to consider, given, you guys just approved our restoration and repairs and how costly that is. I think that at the time depreciation was set, it was at the current, $9 million for a parking structure. So nowadays, it's 25 million. So I think we also need to consider a maintenance fund that is specific to these restoration repairs, so we're not having to budget for them, 3 years, 5 years out. So I think that there's other opportunities to capture what that would look like. And that goes along with the unfortunate conversation of rate increases. So again, we're not at the same utilization as we were in pre-COVID. And so when you see that utilization decrease, you do have to capture at some other level. So those are other conversations that we will have.
Thank you.
I'm just going to, and I don't mean to cut off other conversation, but I wanted to piggyback because I was going to, one of the things I did want to share up here as a now 6-month or so sitting member of the DDA board. I would say from my perspective up here as a commissioner as well, and please, I don't want an onslaught of emails tomorrow, but I think that when you look at the DDA controlling the parking right now, understandably, the DDA is made up of business owners and people who work downtown, and protecting the fees at a low rate is very much in line with their interest in what they want. And of course, everything comes to us at the end anyways, but I think that the city might have a little bit more of a shrewd look at rates. I say this again, please don't fill my inbox tomorrow. I'm not saying we're going to, drastically increase rates overnight if this comes in their city, but I think the city would be in a better position to take a more holistic look at things like rate structures as time goes on if this were to move under the city. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? So go ahead, Heather.
You mentioned in your presentation that that you maintain bathrooms.
Yes, we do.
So which bathrooms are those? All the downtown bathrooms?
So the Park Street public restrooms, they're the ones between Radio Center 2 and 3. We maintain those restrooms. So those are the ones that we've had to decrease the hours on due to destruction and loitering. So we're working on how to best manage those restrooms, but we do oversee them.
Okay, just that's the only one then?
Currently, yes.
Okay. And I just have one other question. Why did the enterprise fund decrease from 10 to 5%?
So this is one of those things that just like in 1991 with the resolution and then 2003 with the contract. So, gradually we've been taking on additional responsibilities. And so the Violations Bureau prior to 2008 was in the Treasurer's Department. So at that time they were running the AS400 system. It was a very lengthy accounting process to determine where all of these fine revenues would go. And so at one point there was a conversation given where the revenue was in 2008, and when they looked at the percentages, the fine revenue in residential, Munson, was roughly 10% of 2008's budget. So the decision was made, let's just do 10%. It coincides with what we've seen over the past years. So then going forward, fees have increased, fines have increased, the whole revenue has increased. And so it just stayed at 10%. At one point, I think the contribution back to the city was $500,000 in our peak. And so at that point, it was, we looked at what the fines were, and they were roughly $50,000. So at that point, we just asked that we be considered the same as other enterprise funds and go back to the 5% and not the 10.
And I think that was approved under last year's budget.
Last year's,
was.
this is the first
So
year.
the city commission approved that reduction from 10 to 5% last fiscal year.
Just last year.
Just last
Yeah.
year.
And the monies that went into the city fund last year were $160,000, right?
I gave you guys the detail on
Yeah,
the email,
I
but
think
I did
that's
not
what
print it, so that would be in the 22-23 activity for city fee, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Jackie.
Just one last one. I noted in your PowerPoint that you indicated that all revenues cover operating expenses. I wondered, do they cover operating expenses fully? Is there a gap there?
Yes, so I think if you, and that's why I provided the breakdown and summarized the revenue with the expenses. So when we talk about the auto parking system fund, as it's mentioned in the budget, it really just looks at 585 as combined. And what we do as we're looking at budgeting and capital improvements and potential rate increases, we really look at the breakdown. So we consider 585 to be the general parking fund, 586 is Hardy, and 587 is Old Town. And when you do get into the granular level, you will notice that the two parking structures do not support themselves. So at that point, the on-street revenues, fines do make up for those two funds to make them whole. So that's one of the things that we look at when we look at projecting revenues, whether or not we should consider increases. There's commissioners currently on the commission that have talked about surplus lots, which currently we use as metered parking. So if we look at those lots being sold, being developed, we would lose that revenue, which then makes it harder for us to make up these gaps. So we're constantly looking at ways to just make the funds whole.
And when you roll up all three of those funds, are operating expenses fully covered by revenues or not?
They are. So there was 1 year post-COVID where we did not, and it was only $40,000. But you'll often see we do a lot of expenses after January, so we try to make sure that we are always in tune with what the projection is towards the end of the fiscal year. And so we pull back projects, pull back capital improvements, and try to move them into the next fiscal year if we think that we're going to be under. Again, we try not to use any of those surplus funds because the purpose of those funds are really what we've captured for depreciation for long-term repairs.
And I'm presuming that was the situation with deferred maintenance?
Yes.
That was, I guess, came by the commission just as recently as last year? Is that when it happened, or?
Been deferring some of this maintenance since COVID. We've been asked to pull items out. We've attempted to use surplus funds in the budget, but that's not really a path we want to go down. And so we have been deferring until we finally rolled everything into one project to hopefully get a good general contractor, maybe better unit costs. And so with that, that's why I mentioned earlier to Commissioner Warner's comment, I think it is time that we start to look at just a maintenance line item and not necessarily a surplus.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Ms. Nennis. We appreciate that. And again, this is a study session, so no action will be taken right now. This was just to get some further feedback, and with our budget being presented next week, next month and next week.
I'm not sure, this is my first time asking this question. So is there a general will for this to be brought before the commission as an agenda item in the future? Okay, so then we'll get that, May 20th would be the next appropriate meeting? Okay, May 20th, thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to the discussion of a social district. Did you want me to just hand it off to Sean? Sure. All right, and we have our planner, Sean Winter, here to present that. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you, everyone. So again, this is the East Side Placemaking Project, for which a social district is a component of that. So I just want to clarify that moving forward. As mentioned in your packet, this project is really the reflection of two efforts that have kind of come together at the same location that were kind of being discussed at the same time. So I'd first like to talk about tactical urbanism. You may have heard this term. It tends to be low-cost, fast, high-impact improvements. So to a more definitive definition, tactical urbanism has been employed around the world to quickly and sometimes temporarily retrofit spaces to be more comfortable for people, which is key, and to help provide better public use of space. So we started seeing a lot of use of tactical urbanism throughout the country during COVID. However, it's been a term that's been popular in the lexicon since 2012 with what's called the Better Block Project in Texas. But it's really used for testing out placemaking ideas. Another term for it is guerrilla urbanism. Frankly, I think both terms are somewhat aggressive for what they are. They're really just pilots or demonstrations. And they're often used to show, again, how public space can be used to benefit people. So sometimes they're used as temporary parks. Sometimes they're used as temporary safety improvements or infrastructure improvements, or as ways to help humanize public spaces. So here are some examples in Groveland, Florida. They've taken some of the parking that is available, the on-street parking, they've turned it into a public dining space, a place where people can sit and talk and congregate. In some cases, they've done temporary bike lanes in some cities to show how that infrastructure could fit and how it could work with existing circulation patterns. Here's an example of where they've done just that. So for about a block and a half, you can see the bike lane, which I'm assuming, based on how the street's designed further in the background, had on-street parking. They took that on-street parking, shifted the parking into one of the two travel lanes, put in a bike lane, took that right kind of like turn chute, if you will, turned that into a public space, and set this up as a demonstration and how we can reconfigure that public realm for better use. Sometimes it's simple as incorporating public art into the existing infrastructure as a way to, again, humanize that public space. And so this is really not anything that's new with the city of Traverse City. Traverse City has embraced the idea of pilots, demonstration projects, tactical urbanism for some time. Since I've moved back here in 2015, the earliest one I can think of is the Lot O pop-up park that occurred over the course of a weekend. The 8th Street lane diet started off as a temporary project or a pilot project. No heavy infrastructure investment was made, rather we just restriped the lines. We have the downtown two-way conversion that is currently underway. And another example that was left off this list was in 2020 and 2021, the city did the shared streets. So that's another way of how we've implemented this demonstration or tactical urbanism. So during the mobility action plan process, the proposal included creating at least 3 tactical urbanism projects. So the mobility action plan leadership team had a meeting where the members came with a bunch of ideas. We put them on a board, we discussed them all, and then we had the chance to vote and rank and pick which ones we wanted. And this one that we're about to talk about, it's in your packet, the service drives on 8th Street, was the one that received the most votes from the Mobility Action Plan leadership team. And the thinking was that in order to have an effective non-motorized network, you have to have places worth walking and biking to. And we know downtown is great, but we have these other commercial areas that could use some benefit. And this was a situation where we had public space, we have additional right-of-way due to easements that were acquired in the 1950s that would allow for these type of enhancements. So it was one of the 4 that the group ultimately landed on that we moved forward with. Unfortunately, over the course of the last year, as you guys are aware, there's been a lot of transition. We weren't really in a position to implement these last summer. So we're kind of coming back to it. With the little resources we have, we're focusing just on this one, again, the top vote from the group, as our first one in that project. And so this is just an example of what was created through that leadership team activity. It's pared down from what we'll talk about today, but this was the catalyst or the starting point to get us to where we are for this discussion. All right, so the second component is the idea of a social district. So these came about in 2020 from the MLCC in response to COVID. And frankly, I was shocked that MLCC considered this, considering you need a separate license just to allow you to dance in a licensed establishment or be there on a Sunday. So this seemed really outside the MLCC box. But many communities embraced this. We did not at the time. We never even really took it up to discussion as far as I was concerned. But what it does is, in addition to being a response to COVID, it helps with that placemaking and some of that economic development. What it requires is establishing a geographic boundary, which is the social district itself. Within that social district are designated areas called common areas. Within those common areas in the social district, one may consume an alcoholic beverage with the proper labeling purchased from a approved licensed establishment within the boundary of the social district. So that's really what it's getting down to. Although we haven't utilized this anywhere in the city yet, 114 villages and cities across the state have used them. The most recent one is Northport, I think just last month, adopted to incorporate one into their city as well. So in order to create a social district, there are some requirements. You have to establish those boundaries as mentioned and define where those common areas are to be located. You need a minimum of 2 licensed establishments. It wasn't until a second licensed establishment was opening in this area that then we began having the conversations with the business owners about the possibility. Because before Common Good moved in, there was only 1 licensed establishment in the area. It was not eligible to create a social district. We could have set out tables and done the tactical urbanism like we had talked about, but we couldn't do this component of the placemaking project. In order to participate, those individual licensed establishments need approval through resolution from the City Commission and the MLCC. Their beverages have to have proper labeling, and there's requirements for the containers. They can't be more than 16 ounces. You need to have signage at the boundaries indicating that you are entering or exiting a social district. MLCC requires a maintenance or management plan, and you have to establish hours of operation. So here are some examples. So this is the one from Holland. This is their social district. They've incorporated where the buildings are. You can see the social district itself is broader in blue than the actual common areas, which are delineated in red, which in this case is the right-of-way area. As I mentioned, you need the signage. We have been brainstorming some ideas of what that signage would look like. We really like this one from South Haven because they actually put the map on the sign, so it helps orientate you to where the boundaries are and where you're located. The other thing we like from Ann Arbor, which we'd probably do, is there's a QR code on the sign that you can scan. It tells you all about it, provides you all the information, the rules, and things like that. And of course, as I mentioned, you need that appropriate container, whether it's a disposable cup that has printed on it the label, or it's a sticker, which is what we're probably trending more towards, that you put on the cup. That way, the individual businesses, if this is allowed, would be able to use a vessel of their choice as long as it meets the MLCC guidelines, because you can also use cans, so you're not creating additional waste. You can put the sticker right on the can as opposed to pouring it into a cup, and now you have one more container to dispose of. So there's a lot of misconceptions that come with changes like this, and I acknowledge that, and it's important to understand them, and so that's why we want to talk about this with you all today. So a couple do's and don'ts of social districts. As I mentioned, they allow the patrons to purchase the alcoholic beverages from a licensed establishment in that district, and then they can consume it in the common areas and the common areas only. It has to be in the marked containers, and again, it facilitates shared use for outdoor seating and dining areas, because you are not allowed to have the common areas be for exclusive use to any one business. So what we're proposing in those service drives would be open to anyone in the public to sit at any time. In fact, the MLCC prohibits table service in the common areas. You can't do that. It's not allowed. You have to go into the establishment to get that beverage. Some don'ts. It does not establish new licensees by default. We already have 3 licensees here. This doesn't make new licensees. This doesn't take away, but they would have to be approved separately in order to participate. It does not allow alcohol to be brought into other businesses in the district unless permitted, but that's the current law as it is today. So that's just maintaining the law that is there. Many people, if you've probably been to a beauty salon or a barber shop, they will have drinks there. They're not a licensee, but they're not selling it, but they can give it to you. That can happen here as well. You're not allowed to take the open alcohol containers outside the district boundaries or outside the identified public common areas. You're also not allowed to bring alcohol into the common areas from outside. So in other words, you couldn't go to a party store, buy a 6-pack, take it to the common area and drink it. That would be against the law. You can only buy it from those licensed establishments. And of course, it does not allow for the promoting of overserving of patrons, because a lot of times when you talk about a social district that would allow the consumption of alcoholic beverages in a public space, people get a vision of like a street festival taking place. I've been to a number of these throughout the state myself, not intentionally. Most of the time, I haven't even known I was in a social district, except for when I was walking, I saw the sign delineating the boundary. Most of the time, you don't even see people using it a whole lot. So a little bit more on the actual location of it. So the proposed district is centered on East 8th Street and Garfield Avenue. It encompasses the proposed tactical urbanism elements that we looked at earlier, and I'll show you some more of in a moment. It does include other portions of the commercial properties. Some of them wanted to be included. We've had numerous meetings with the property owners there. Even businesses that aren't in the food and beverage business appreciated the opportunity to be part of something, to have a bit of an identity, to have something that they can market and kind of work together. We wrote this policy in our department that's in your packet some time ago, so it stated that May 1st to October 31st is when we're proposing that it would operate, so this would just be seasonal. The material would be removed, and then 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. Most of these businesses close before 10 p.m., but in case people wanted to kind of sit and talk and finish up, they'd have a little bit longer. Some have questioned 9 a.m. Well, some of these places do serve breakfast and brunch on the weekend, so it would just give them the opportunity to utilize that outdoor space. And we're finding people are wanting more of that since COVID. They got used to that nice outside al fresco type dining, and this would provide that opportunity. I will state that the City Commission can revoke the social district at any point, so our intent would be to work with the property owners throughout the summer, make any tweaks to the placemaking project as we've laid it out to better suit them and the public at large, and then of course meet with them at the end of the season to get their feedback, come back to the City Commission, discuss that, see how you may or may not want to address it for the coming year. So right here we can see the map of the proposed district. So the darker pink line is the social district. The common areas are what you see hashed in purple there. So we started with the licensees and we looked at the zoning, and the existing land use that is around it. Originally, we had it including the alleys to the properties that front Garfield and Garfield and 8th Street, but that way people could circulate around the properties. Ultimately, we thought that that might be a little too close to the neighborhood, so the alleys themselves are not part of it. It's just the rear property line of the properties that have frontage on 8th and Garfield. So you wouldn't be able to walk down the alleys adjacent to the residential properties with an open container. You'd be in violation of the laws of the social district. Well, I'll just go through and then we can pull this map up if you have questions about it. So then we have the zoning. It's mostly C2 with a little bit of C3 and C1 to the south. The 3 licensed businesses that we currently have operating this area include Oakwood Proper Burgers, Common Good Bakery, and our newest commercial tenant in that area, Tank Space, which is the second location of Earth and Ales. So this project is proposing that those access drives be used temporarily as public space and seating areas. We propose a pilot to test permanent redesign, repurposing of the access drives for mobility improvements and placemaking, because both Garfield and 8th Street are on the Mobility Action Plan network map. So we're calling for improvements in these locations. So before we get to that point where we're pouring concrete and things like that, we wanted the opportunity to see how people interact with this space if it's redesigned and repurposed. And we also see this as an economic development driver through placemaking. We know we can use 8th Street as an example. When we invest in ourselves and our infrastructure, we see other investment follow with Ruth Park, Common Good, West Shore Bank, and things like that. And we also want to give a nod to all the local businesses in this area that are making investment. They are at a bit of a disadvantage compared to downtown. They don't have the benefit of TIF paying for infrastructure improvements and placemaking. They don't have access to a redevelopment liquor license, which costs about $25,000 downtown. They have to go out on the market and find one for $100,000 or more. They don't have the business density that generates the foot traffic. So we saw this as an opportunity to help another commercial area in our city, because as we look at our master plan, and we've had very favorable feedback throughout the process of drafting that plan, we were calling for focusing on different nodes of commercial activity throughout the city so that people have access to places to congregate, to be with each other, to meet up, to shop, to get their needs met. And so this is just a step moving closer towards that. So we'll look at this isometric view a little bit here. This is really simply done with the aerial in the background for reference. So what we're proposing to do is to close off the access drives to vehicles using large concrete planters and filling them with plants to help soften the area and make it more inviting than, say, orange type 3 barricade fences that you'd see at a construction site. On the north side right here, I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, it doesn't look like it, between Common Good and Prout Financial, that's actually a platted alley, so we intend to leave access to that. That's also how those businesses access their parking in the rear and the side. Similarly, I don't know if I said that right, even tried 3 times, but on the east side, right past Eastfield Laundry, that's another alley that we're maintaining access to, because that's how you can get to the parking lot behind all those buildings as well. But otherwise, we would use those planters to close it off. We have proposed putting some galvanized planters along the existing raised median to kind of create a little bit more of that visual buffer, putting 6 picnic tables on each side of the street, putting them closer to the sidewalk that exists in front of the businesses, again, to have more spatial separation from the travel lanes. 2 bike racks, 1 on each side. We would also have 2 trash cans on each side of the street. And with those picnic tables, we would use umbrellas anchored to bases underneath, and the umbrellas in turn would have solar-powered LED lights that run on the arms underneath each of them, which we felt would be a better option than trying to run string lights or something like that throughout the area. So in picking these items, we, in addition to meeting with the design team and having all the development departments weigh in on some of these concepts, we've worked a lot with our Parks and Rec superintendent to source materials that are already used in the park system, so that in the event the city commission decides they don't want to pursue this any further, that these materials wouldn't go to waste. They're already the products that we use. So those planters, benches, picnic tables, those are all currently used. We don't use umbrellas in our parks yet, so we had to pick different ones. But bike racks, they're the same type that we use downtown, that we put out in the summertime. the trash cans with the bonnet lids, which are very important because those help keep the seagulls from getting into it too much, the liners, the planters, and of course the posts and the signs that we would need at each of the pedestrian exit and entrance points to the social district. So overall, when we price these out, the price comes out with a contingency of 10% to about $60,000, which to me, that's a lot of money. But in working on many of these projects, it's not a significant amount, especially compared to any real capital infrastructure improvement. I've had 3 meetings with the Treasury Department about this, and they have indicated that we have an economic development fund that is a restricted fund. However, the funds are allowed to be used for these purposes, and so they have confirmed that those funds are available to begin moving forward with this. So in terms of next steps, well, we'll have to come back to you at some point, but if we get the green light to you, of course, we'll have to order these materials. Some of them have indicated by their vendor that they have a up to 6-week lead time, so this will take a little bit of time to get these materials acquired. If there's an opportunity that we can acquire them and Parks has surplus, maybe we can utilize the surplus from Parks and replace it with the ones that are getting ordered. Those are continued conversations that need to take place. Again, I mentioned we got them from Park Service. So we do have a maintenance and management plan draft that we have in there. We have talked to the property owners. When this was first proposed last year, we met with DPS to talk about maintenance, and they had a lot of concern about it being closed off and their inability to get in there to kind of clean things up. So the expectation would be, and again, this has been shared with those property owners, that they would help the city out. We would modify our contract with GFL that we already have for trash removal downtown, as well as some of the parks, to include this area, and we've already started those conversations. But we would ask them to help with the watering of the plants, if they see any litter down there, and to put the picnic tables or the umbrellas down at night when they're done, especially if it's windy. But what we will need to do is, after discussion today, this is a study session, so of course no decision can be made, so we would have to bring this back to you for a decision. And it would be a resolution from the city establishing the social district itself, the approval of the management plan, as well as resolutions for the individual licensees to go ahead and move forward with MLCC. So with that, if you have any questions, happy to have the conversation. And we do have some, I know some of the business owners are in attendance, so they may want to speak. I don't know if that's up to you, Mayor.
Mitch, go ahead.
Yeah, 2 things right off the bat. I understand the reasoning behind not making the boundaries inclusive of the alleys, but I am perplexed that that reasoning isn't applied to the boundary roads, namely Michigan Avenue, Walnut, Civic Center Drive, Boyd, and Hastings. I mean, I get the need to create common space, but including sidewalks that are on residential blocks across the street from the commercial property seems an ill fit, as well as for the purposes of clearly demarcating where the social district starts and ends, having that be on the, when you walk onto the block that includes the commercial properties, I think would be a little more obvious to somebody just traversing the sidewalk than having it start on the opposite side of the street. So do you have a specific reason that those streets are fully included, including sidewalks on both sides?
Yeah, so we thought it would be kind of confusing to people if we're trying to say, okay, on this side of the street you can, but on this side of the street you can't, so we just took the whole street. We could run the boundary down the center line if that's the city commission's prerogative. But again, we just wanted to make it intuitive to people, you know, like, okay, this block I can be on, rather than just this side or that side. You know, Hastings, we went down that one block because we don't know, we just were envisioning how people would circulate throughout the area potentially. And we did get support from the HOA of that condo association on the corner there, so they didn't have any opposition to it. But again, we could move that eastern boundary there on Hastings to the center line if that's what you would like. And same with like Michigan Street and the others. So.
And other question about trash management, I appreciate, especially if we're going to have more people circulating between different businesses, having a system to manage the trash. However, I am a little leery to just, even though it's simpler, expanding it onto the existing GFL contract, since unlike a downtown, this is a much smaller area with a select number of businesses that will be creating that trash. And unlike, say, a park, especially our waterfront parks, you don't have a whole lot of people bringing in meals or drinks or other trash that will ultimately be generated from outside it. So personally, I'd be in favor of looking into creating a special assessment district that would then be funding trash management within the area, and while the city could put out the bins, the financial responsibility for managing the trash would be on the business owners, which I think would result in perhaps realizing both better locations and a better emptying schedule to keep the area looking clean, since I don't want a situation where all the businesses already have their private trash dumpsters behind them, but then we are inviting the creation of more trash and putting it on the city to then manage.
Yeah, I think with that, I would point out that this is not exclusive to any business. Anyone could use it. We don't
Yes.
charge residents around a park, a special improvement district, because they visit the park and throw trash out. This is a public space. We manage the trash in the public space. It is true some of those businesses may, their patrons may be using it, but there may be people donating trash that have nothing to do with those businesses. They're just city residents that are coming and enjoying city space. So, that's something for the commission to decide, but I think now we're getting away from the concept of a pilot and talking about a more permanent change, So I think maybe if we get to the point where we're like, hey, we're gonna redesign this intersection, we're gonna turn these into plazas, maybe we think about that there as a funding mechanism, but I don't know that that's a fair burden to put on all those businesses there at this time.
Other questions? Go ahead, Tim.
Two concerns. One is, and it's on this body, we haven't really heard about the healthy drinking culture in a while. It got set aside because maybe we as a city didn't get a grant. The optics to me are a little, I'll just say odd. It's not that they're troubling, just odd. Like we thought we were pursuing a healthy drinking culture, and now we think we're going to go for a social district. I would like to think that we as a city or as a community could at least come up with some sort of logical arguments why we've made that pivot. I don't have it. I'm not, opposed outright for this. It's just, it seems like a disconnect somehow. And it would be helpful, I think, if this moves forward and being promoted, how to reconcile that. Or maybe reconcile is too strong a word. How do we hold two disparate thoughts in our heads at the same time? So there's that. And then the other is, I see this as an economic development, and that I can potentially support, but to have this be the very first project from the Mobility Action Plan seems like a stretch, like the idea that, if we just had better places for people to walk and bike to, people would walk and bike. Yeah, kind of, but I don't think that's the main barrier. I don't think and so, again, maybe, like that's already been stated, but I think promoting it more as economic development, and a member of the community who's not part of this neighborhood, shared her thoughts that, her impression is downtown gets everything. So why can't this neighborhood have something? And it's an excellent argument. But then how do we jump to, so say $60,000, which to her point that's nothing, compared to what the DDA spends on all sorts of stuff. And I can't argue with that, but why this? So why, because we don't call it alcohol, but it's alcohol. So it's a social district, but again, how do we make the argument that this is the economic development that we're looking for? And maybe it's there, but that's where there's kind of a theme in what I've just shared as far as I'm not outright opposed. I'm just a little concerned with, I don't know, how we're the words around it maybe. Maybe that's all it is, semantics, I don't know.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying completely, and I have wrestled with this. I'm not very involved in the healthier drinking culture, and I mean, it was already underway when I started at the city. I mean, I will say it's not an alcohol prohibition plan, you know, it's a healthier drinking culture. The city commission has awarded these licensees since then. And I think they're actually great examples and good stewards of liquor licenses. I mean, most of them don't serve liquor. They aren't open late. They're primarily food establishments that have alcohol as a component. So, I mean, I think that's what I would say to that. You know, and you guys have an off-ramp at any point if this is at odds with the philosophical values of the city commission and that culture and that plan, or it's operating in a way or turning out to be something other than what you thought, or maybe in worst case scenario turning into what you fear, then yeah, we can pull the plug on it. As far as the mobility action plan, I agree. I didn't vote for this one. It was a hard sell for me, but the group spoke as a whole, and that's why this is the one that's being brought first, is because this is the one that had the most votes. And again, it's a great opportunity, I think, in terms of what we see happening there already to build off of that investment that's occurring. Again, these are all local businesses, local owners and stuff. And we've had some really good conversations throughout this. Like, you know, there's been questions, why so far south, right? Because we don't have those establishments. Well, by bringing it a little further south, we might be creating opportunity, you know? Sometimes you have to put the rules in place so people know what they're working on. I will say, to the south, we had a dentist at a meeting, and she was like, clearly I don't benefit from this, but the rising tide lifts all ships analogy. She's like, anything to get more people to know that I'm here, I'm all about. So those are just some examples. We had one business owner speak to another, the one that owns Jim's Apothecary, and had said, you know, I've lived here for 7 years. I've never been in your store. If I was eating out in front of it, out of curiosity, I'd probably go in. You know, so that's kind of the idea of what we're getting at here. Knowing that people do like to dine outside, we offer that as sidewalk cafes downtown. We don't have sidewalks that are wide enough here, so that's why we're like, well, maybe the social district would work. Tank Space, for instance, doesn't have any place to be outside, as far as I know it. I think their parcel is the building itself. So it's just kind of building off, and same thing with Common Good, for that matter. I think they have some space for parking next door, but that's really about it. And then you start to hear some synergy taking place. I'd say that's probably the best thing over this effort so far, is bringing the business owners together, and then they're starting to talk. We heard one say, like, hey, I'm thinking about doing the sidewalk sale event later this year. Maybe I can partner with you and we can do something. It's like, okay, that alone has made it worth it so far from our perspective, is just getting everyone in the same room to talk about their area. I will say we've had great conversations with them as well. It's a good group of people down there. No, I'm just rambling, so I don't know if I answered your question.
So initially, is that why this is so big? Because it seems to work for me for just the corner here where the spots are. Some of the words out on the streets was they were afraid we're shutting down 8th Street like we did Front Street.
No.
Which would be cool, but that's not feasible. But why, like, the whole, all the way down 8th and between 8th and Walnut, did they ask for that?
You know, we just started again looking at the zoning and the land use and proposed it to them, and then we went and invited all those property owners and business owners to attend, and they came and they didn't express any,
But
opposition.
None of the tenants showed up and had any issue?
What's that?
None of the tenants showed up and had any issue?
Tenants.
Well, I know of one that's got a couple decades of sobriety that lives like right here on the corner and is like right in the middle of it. And although, being in the program myself, I know, over time I can go and get a burger and not order a drink. I have that willpower, but to constantly bring it to my doorstep, I just don't know why this block is included.
And I don't know exactly which block, Mark, you're looking at.
Between Walnut and 8th Street, west of Garfield.
Yeah, we were really using the roads as the boundaries, and since it's roads all the way around and not alleys, that's why we just kind of encapsulated that whole area. But we could, again, choke it down smaller to just include the property lines.
What, these property owners, say Rounds, the hair salon, the oil change, et cetera, they didn't specifically ask to be part of this?
No.
Okay.
No, those ones didn't, but they were invited to be part of the conversation. Yeah. The,
I just don't want to fight against it if they want to be part of this, but I just,
no, it wasn't those that had approached us, but other business owners in here had approached us.
Mayor Shamrock?
Yeah, go ahead. Well, real quick. We'll have
Sorry, I
Senator.
just wanted to know if, because Mr. Winters and I did talk about the district and some of the ideas behind some of the initial concepts for boundaries, would it be beneficial to bring back two or three, to maybe two other options that are more refined in scope, that are a little tighter to the actual heart of the corridor? Would that be something that the board would want to see, the commission would want to see? Okay.
Well, Commissioner Shaw had her hand up first.
Yeah, speaking to economic development, I totally support that. And I understand why the eateries and the pub that face each other on that portion of the block would want to make their street more attractive, to get traffic to stop, to bring people in on their bikes or whatever, but the scope seems completely out of proportion to the need. I looked through the list of other places that are using the social district in Michigan. Holland has a really great video about their social district. But the whole idea is that patrons of restaurants can come and get a drink someplace and then window shop while they're waiting for their table. Well, we don't really have any window shopping there. I mean, there's that apothecary there, that's new, and then you can go down to Nomi, but you're going to go visit Planned Parenthood. You're going to walk the neighborhood of Walnut Street. You're going to walk down Garfield and then cross somehow and walk back. I don't understand these little these little blocks that are going west off Garfield. I don't understand walking down Garfield in the first place. I don't get it. There's really, maybe someday they will come, but it's not today. The social districts really seem to be exclusive to downtowns. I didn't see anyone anywhere that wasn't a downtown area. And downtowns have slower traffic. They have more pedestrians. I know that's, that's what you're trying to create here, but like Petoskey, they have one. But that's not what's happening there right now. I don't understand why you wouldn't want to just get the adjoining businesses to agree to close those service drives down and make a common area so that when you're doing your laundry, you can be out there, reading or whatever. The vape store, you can sit out and vape in front. Everybody could use that. Why does it have to be just this huge, gigantic drinking space? I'm also really concerned about plastic. We've got 22 million pounds of plastic going into our Great Lakes every year. This is a giant plastic boon here, and I am I want all of our city departments to do everything they possibly can to find alternatives to plastic and encourage everyone to find alternatives to plastic. So I'm interested in the placemaking for this, very, very interested in the placemaking for this, and the economic development of that area. But creating this giant drinking zone, I can't, I certainly can't support it in its current state.
Commissioner
Yeah,
Anderson?
to your first point there, I'll say, that is the essence of planning. It's like you got to put it out there and plan for it before you get the people walking and window shopping and stuff like that. So maybe by creating this, people might see this as an opportunity to invest and move a new business in there and stuff like that. So that's what we're trying to do with that, is create that place, that identity, that brand, and give these people the opportunity to do so. I think that was your first question. Second question, I'm not sure. Do you want to reiterate that, Heather?
can you go down 2 slides so that we're looking at that spot?
Yep.
Is that what you,
Is that a little better, maybe?
well, just that area, would it be too small to start from there? And depending on the success of it, then the commission could decide at a later point to expand.
We definitely could, yeah. I think there would be disappointment from the businesses that aren't on this block, though, that have been coming to these meetings and wanting to be part of this, wanting to be part of something. And again,
Does it cross Garfield?
Mhm.
The businesses that have been coming and asking for it
Yeah.
are on the other side of Garfield?
Correct, yeah, that we've been participating in the meetings with and stuff, so, I mean, it's ultimately your decision, but we have had a lot of meetings, a lot of conversations with these property owners, and that's why we landed on this recommendation. It wasn't just cooked up in our office or anything like that, so I know we get that accusation a lot, but, you know, it's ultimately gonna be your direction and where you want it to go.
Commissioner Anderson, you had your hand up.
I did, thank you. I share Commissioner Werner's concerns about reconciling this expansion of a social district with our healthy drinking culture initiatives, and I have difficulty reconciling that. I am very concerned about the scope of this and how it impinges and nears residential areas, the potential for sip and stroll throughout that area, as well as inadequate trash management and being sensitive to resources and our environmental footprint is a concern. Even in a scaled back version, I have some issues surrounding safety. Pedestrians crossing 8th Street, not at the intersection, I think is a reasonable likelihood. I went out Friday and took a look at the often complained about pavement condition on the southern service drive, and it is indeed a minefield. I'm not sure it's safe for heavy-duty pedestrian use in the condition that it's in right now. I have concerns about use of the alleyway that's east of Eastfield Laundry as continuous two-way traffic to get to parking behind that strip of stores. It is already narrow. It has diagonal parking on two sides of that alleyway, and I'm not sure that it could accommodate safely pedestrian traffic on top of that. So there are some real rubber hits the road sort of safety issues for me here, as well as having heard a great deal from residents of the neighborhood who really are concerned about the concept itself of a social district in their neighborhood. And I think that's it.
I just have one more thing.
All right.
Yeah, to go back to Holland's video, they are very strict about you can only drink on a sidewalk. You can't go into a store with your drink. You can't cross the street sipping your drink. You can cross the street, but you can't drink in the street. You cannot drink in green spaces, and you can't drink in parking lots. And you've got common space running right through parking lots. Plus, there's so little ability to see or do anything in this area beyond the 3 eating establishments that would be open in the evening that I feel like you're going to invite people to be hanging out in parking lots.
So,
I don't know. I mean, we followed the right-of-ways. I guess I'm concerned where you said it's going through a parking lot.
It's going through the parking lot right next to the laundromat.
In the right-of-way alley. Yeah. Yeah, and to your point, Jackie, like, the pedestrians are walking there now. That alley exists. The angled parking is still there. Like, we're not changing the format of the area. I think that's important to understand. I think these are important
But
things
we're
to raise.
changing the usage patterns
Potentially.
significantly. And I think that your issue brings up the question of enforcement. You know, there are going to be a lot of rules and regulation. Who will be enforcing these?
so
The police, like, they enforce all the other liquor laws, so this would be part of theirs. And we've had meetings with Matt and his department to discuss this, so.
if I can add some 2 cents here. First, the healthier drinking culture, I appreciate Commissioner Warner bringing that up. I sat through the prelim, the presentations and everything, and it was very much focused on downtown. And while I appreciate that being brought up as part of this discussion for the optics, as Commissioner Warner put it, I think that's actually all the more important reason why we're talking about it in the context here of an area that doesn't see a lot of foot traffic and by neighborhoods that don't have a lot of places to gather. I've seen the emails as well from people. I agree with the consensus here that seems to be, can we see some maps that are more tightening this up to more of the kind of commercial areas that want to participate? I completely agree with that. But I will say I was at the Traverse Heights Neighborhood Association when, before Tank Space opened, they came to talk to our neighbors about opening there and a new place available. And a lot of neighbors in Traverse Heights were excited to have just some place to go and sit and not have to just go downtown. And we have a couple spaces nearby. I won't pick businesses by putting names out. But there's maybe one place where you can go congregate and maybe have a drink or a pizza or a non-alcoholic drink. And I kind of wanted to point that out as someone who worked at Horizon Books for many years. You know, they have their table out on their sidewalk. People don't drink at it. They have non-alcoholic drinks and they sit there. And I think that while they'll be allowed in this space, I can also see this being someplace that if I lived in one of the neighborhoods and I was underage or even not, and lived near one of those neighborhoods anyways, of going and getting an iced tea and a sandwich and sitting out at a sidewalk cafe. Mike We Lao downtown with our parking spot cafes and other things. I guess I'm not saying I'm 100% sold exactly how this is with everything that goes along with it, but the placemaking here at 8th and Garfield does excite me because that is an area, and this whole neighborhood south of there does often feel like it's a drive-through neighborhood. And it's people drive through quickly through Traverse Heights all the time. Let's just be real that Traverse Heights has been knocked in this area for years. And we've invested in it with sidewalks, and I think it's finally changing, but Traverse Heights throughout the rest of the city had a denotation for a while, and it's why we invested a lot in sidewalks, and there hadn't been a lot of infrastructure 10 years ago, investment. And I'm not saying that this is inherently the right answer, but I'm also saying that we continue to have conversations based around downtown when we need to be looking at other areas. Old Town has some expansion out there where we've had sidewalk cafe, or sidewalk, I guess, do we call them sidewalk cafes when we had the tables on the chair, or in the parking spots? The platform cafes, thank you, I forgot about the phrasing there. We've had those in Old Town that is also much closer to neighborhoods than downtown. So I guess I would say that as we have this conversation, placing all of the issues of downtown there, I don't think is entirely fair because it isn't downtown. I agree the scope is very large. I'm not saying I'd 100% be for it right now, but as someone who lives as part of the neighborhood associations over there, I know that there's concerns about it going to the residential streets. I join in those, but I also know that there are people who have wanted to see more happen over there, especially as it's an area that tends to be more affordable for families to move into. But I'm just gonna leave that as my kind of 2 cents to put that back into perspective of we are talking about this other part of town here than downtown as we have these conversations.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it has an opportunity to create a really good vibe. I already like the vibe they've created just by investing in being in this area. I just want to make sure that all the other concerns that were brought by residents are heard.
Agreed. Go ahead, Mitch.
Yeah, well, since the laws have changed, I've been to a dozen of these so-called social districts in other cities around the state, and I can say that they aren't an imminent social disaster. The sky does not fall on these communities. Yeah, just yesterday I was in Boyne City and East Jordan, and it seemed to be working just fine. But I do feel that with the healthier drinking culture study currently just sitting on a shelf, it's not even a matter of optics, but a matter of process, since, as I have brought up several times before, it did outline some early steps that the city commission should take, and one of those steps was looking at the proper number, distribution, and locations of liquor licenses throughout the city. This doesn't change any existing liquor license locations. It doesn't allow any more. And frankly, this could be very well in keeping with what would have emerged from those discussions about deconcentrating liquor licenses from the downtown area and seeing how we could put them in other places. But that is not how this discussion has gotten to this point. We are saying, hey, here's an area that needs some, or could benefit from additional placemaking and economic development, which is readily apparent if you drive, walk, bike down either service drive. But I feel like it would have been a much better process had we started the discussions with the Healthier Drinking Cultures recommendations and said, okay, we are looking at how to have a more equitable and balanced distribution of liquor licenses throughout the city so they're not concentrated in one area. Here is a specific node that has some, how can we help that flourish, rather than saying, yes, that's in keeping with the general idea, but the discussion seems pretty divorced from a study that was done a couple years ago, and from the perspective of many people in the city is just sitting on a shelf.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it is sitting on a shelf, you know, it's there, as Amy said, it did focus on downtown, and that seemed to be the problem at that time. That's not these business owners' fault. They should not be punished because the city commission has not taken action on that plan, in my mind, and they approached us, and we serve the public, and so that's why we've been meeting with them and bringing it back to you to consider.
Social districts didn't even exist when the study was completed, did they?
Yeah,
Just barely?
no one was touching it then, trust me. Yeah, and you're right. I've been, as I mentioned, to a lot of these social districts. The only time I've ever seen an open container in one, I was sharing this with Benjamin earlier, was in the Grand Rapids one by Monroe Circle, or Monroe Center.
20
Or-
Monroe?
No, where Rosa Parks Circle is. But they had a live band playing in the park. It made sense. As a novelty, I purchased a beer. I thought that'd be fun. It wasn't fun because my dad and brother who I was with then wanted to go inside a place and I had to stand outside by myself because you can't bring it into another place. So not the novelty I thought it was. But to your point, Mitch, it's really somewhat unrecognizable in these locations. You know, I read the concerns too that, you know, people are going to be being overserved and then leaving the area. Well, that could happen with or without a social district because there's licensees there. Now, within the social district, the licensees have to play by the same rules. They could lose that $100,000 license by overserving people. Like, so they have that benefit and not letting that happen is the other issue. And I mean, I don't drink anymore, but I recall, you know, if someone wanted to tie one on, they probably want to be close to the source, not walking down Garfield and turning around, walking back to 8th Street to get one, then just, you know, like they're going to probably pony up if that's their prerogative to a place where they can purchase more than one beverage.
Are there any further questions at this time? Tim?
Oh, sorry.
Mitch, Mitch just went, okay.
I was just, it will probably unfold this way, but I was curious, since we do have a number of the public here, could we have public comment after
I was going to
this?
call for public comment, Mr.
Thank you.
Treadwell, thank you. Go ahead. Mitch.
So, this isn't a question for now, but this is more, if, it sounds like we will at least discuss this again. So a request maybe of the city clerk's office, and it might not even be part of next discussion. Maybe it's, if this happens, we talk about it next year. And that is, we heard about platform cafes. I know the city leases property to various restaurants, et cetera.
Yeah.
So just to be able to see the bigger picture, like, okay, where are all these places? It's not that it needs to be uniform, but just so we and you kind of can, oh, that's right, I forgot about that one over there, we're doing this, and here we're helping and potentially helping to invest in economic development. And again, not that we have to justify everything necessarily, but we as a city potentially investing here, and yet for a platform cafe, we've heard that, well, that's a really big investment for restaurant ABC to invest in over there. Again, I'm not saying, oh, we should do it for them, just so we understand what we're doing. That's all. Sure. Thanks.
That makes sense. Could we also, ahead of the next one, have the Better Drinking Culture study as part of the packet, or at least sent to the commissioners? I think it has been a while since that's been talked about, and I think it's almost become lore that it was very focused on downtown, and it seems to be thought of as a blueprint for the entirety of the city of how we're going to handle things, and it really wasn't, I don't think, that broad as a whole. So I think it'd be good for everybody to kind of refresh what, both the great tips that, there were some good ideas that came out of it, but also the scope of what it actually was at the time.
And in addition to Benjamin maybe sending that out, I'll link it in the next memo. That way you can click the link, and it's not 40 extra pages in your packet.
Yeah, sorry.
And stuff. Yeah,
I
but
was
you
using
can have it.
old-fashioned terms. You don't have to attach it. I know it's up there somewhere.
And that will probably, with this study session being moved a week, we missed last Friday's deadline for May 6th, so probably May 20th was the earliest that it would
Great.
come back for consideration. I think,
Great.
right, Benjamin? Okay.
Okay, great, thank you. I'll let you remove Sean, so. As I was going to say, with that, I recognize that a lot of the people in the crowd here were here to talk about this issue. I recognize some neighbors and people we've gotten some emails from, so I definitely want to make sure we have a moment here for some public comment. So I will turn it over to Benjamin to read public comment. If you'd like to make public comment, please line up at the podium, and we'll get that started.
Yeah, so anyone who wishes to speak, please come to the podium and state your name and address. Indicate if you're a city resident, non-city resident, or a city business owner. We have a 3-minute time allotment. When your time has elapsed, the timer will beep. And we ask that all language be respectful to everyone. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Whitney Allen. I own the property at 1019 East 8th Street, formerly the Blue property. I'm also a city resident. So if we could have that map back up on the screen. I bought the strip mall that was formerly Blue Photo. I have 5 businesses in there, one of which is the home to 12 practitioners. Each of those practitioners has a beverage cooler in their unit. They serve alcohol to their guests and along with a snack basket. So keeping this through the corner of Walnut and Michigan includes the entirety of my business as well. I also have a commercial kitchen on the east side. Eventually, the hope is for that to be an eatery. Funding, that is in the future. The property on the north side is also a commercial building. So, Mark, I'm not familiar with who you were speaking of in recovery is in that space. We have all short-term rentals on the west side, and I've spoken to 90% of the tenants in those spaces.
The northeast corner,
So in the house right across from,
right behind the oil change.
Let's let the public comment go. Sorry, we can do that later.
so on that entire block, there's 4 residents, I believe, if 5 maybe. 2 of them are included into our property. To speak on people in recovery, my husband is 13 years clean and sober. I'm not. I do enjoy a beverage every now and then. I do like to go to a place outside that's not a bar that I can partake in a glass of alcohol if I want. I don't foresee that type of environment affecting people on their doorstep. Again, we have people in our building all the time that are enjoying beverages. I wrote out this whole speech I was going to read today, but I think my 3 minutes might be up.
About 40 seconds.
Okay. So as a business owner of the specific community with no direct effect from beer or liquor sales, I can attest to the fact that the establishment of a social district would bring numerous positive effects for all businesses in the area. I think our biggest issue is going to be to dispel the misconception of those advocating for a social district that are solely driven by profit, as many people on the Facebook post suggested. We are neighbors, we're the children's teachers, we are small group leaders in our churches, we're volunteer coaches, and we're local advocates who feel passionate about something, and we've decided to risk it to bring it to this community. Despite not serving alcohol, my business, along with many others.
Ms. Allen, thank you for your comments. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Nan Sarufka, and I am that building. So I am the blue building on Hastings that runs adjacent to the parking lot, and I'm cornered by Riggs Alley as well as Hastings. And so there is a tremendous amount of already, we'll just say shenanigans that happens in the alleyway as well as the parking lot. I see it every day from my home. I do want to thank Commissioner Shaw and Anderson for your comments. They were everything that I hit upon prior to coming, so I won't speak to that, but thank you. My only other comment is that I kept hearing that the feedback of the property owners was elicited. We were not. We do not have an HOA or a community group. Nobody on Hastings knew about this until it was posted in the ticker. So if we can be involved in that conversation a little bit more deeper, or through a postcard in a mailbox, since we don't have an association, that would be greatly appreciated.
Absolutely.
I also welcome anybody to come and sit on my front porch, have a coffee, have an adult beverage, and talk a little bit more about the residential impact to this right on that corner, because we see it every day. I'm the one that has a nice perennial garden. If you happen to come by, just wave. Out there all the time. Thanks.
Thanks, Sam.
For the record, if you don't mind, would you just spell your last name?
Sure. S is in Sam, U-R-U, F is in Frank, K-A.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Chris Rockwood, and I own 1125 East 8th Street right now, where the sauce company is, and previous owner of Press on Juice. There is no one more interested in healthy drinking than I had been for 7 years, and I would have done anything to have some safe areas for people to go and sit and enjoy. I had to actually close my business because I wasn't getting the support from the community to have outdoor seating. It was very locked down. I put flyers at the Civic Center. I am in full support of having the zone rearranged. I do want to let you know the shenanigans that are happening in the neighborhood around the garbage situation. I've personally removed 7 mattresses out of the garbage in the back. I've had 2 people that have come into my establishment where I had to call an ambulance because they were ODing. It didn't have to do with alcohol in the area, and it didn't have to do with anything but people having trouble. So I do agree we need to be good neighbors and help them, and that's exactly what I did. It's very difficult in that area to invest in the building, and I very much would like to see more investments personally in my building and from the community. I want to say that there were a lot of times when the commission used the word "but" when they were talking, and I would just caution you with that because that actually discounts what you said prior to that. So whether you support it or not, I think you should understand this is an investment in the places where you can sit outside and enjoy company. And I would have done anything to have this in front of my area, and I own part of the area where the parking lots are and shoveled. The Holland video that you referenced, Ms. Shaw, I totally appreciate that, but it is very difficult to have this kind of upswing that, and I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. Sean, that reference, this is the investment that we need to have in this part of the town. I also agree with everyone in the community that I feel like it's too big and on maybe some residential streets. I do also want to confirm that I agree with that. I did nothing but pick up trash in the alley. I petitioned everyone in the alley to resurface behind my building. I couldn't get that to happen. I heard the word that there's significant concern about this area. I would tell you that I would be significant concerned if you did not do anything to beautify this area, as someone who is trying really hard to make it
Ms.
better.
Rockwood, thank you for your comments. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Raymond. I'm a resident of the city, and I'm a business owner as well with a business on the west side of downtown. I just wanted to say, look, I am so supportive of social gathering, encouraging people to come out, meet their neighbors, gather, eat, all of that. Placemaking, I love how we've done the cafes on the side downtown. I think it's fabulous. The issue I have is linking the social gathering and connection with alcohol.
I don't understand why that has to be the case here. I definitely support it around the establishments that are selling the alcohol. That makes perfect sense. It looks beautiful. The renderings look beautiful. And if it needs to go all the way down to Nomi Collective, great. If it's that 8th Street area where it's clear to anybody who's walking, it's easy to put the signs, people can understand. But I really have no understanding why the drinking part of the social district has to extend beyond that. As a mother of children who live close by, we live just a block or two away from the north end of the district, I'm really concerned about people. It's almost inviting people to stroll past the blue signs that might stay there with alcohol. We already have people who come down our streets and knock on doors sometimes at night who are inebriated. I don't want that to happen when my kids are outside playing or waiting by the bus stop or whatever, right? Or riding bikes to school. The other thing I'm actually really concerned about safety-wise is encouraging the people who've been drinking to wander down Garfield and the corner of 8th. That just seems one of our busiest corridors in Traverse City, especially right now. I think safety is just paramount, and I feel like this is really irresponsible to encourage people to utilize those as drinking areas, like where I see the common spaces. That just doesn't seem in line with our ideas of building a community that's safe. I do think having the area around the establishments themselves would encourage responsible drinking. You're close by. But again, it's not putting too much pressure on our police, who are already required to and needed elsewhere in our city as well, to come and police whether someone's holding a cup, whether they brought it through the blue sign district. I just think that puts way too much pressure on them. And so limiting it to an area, I think, would help meet both needs, the best of both worlds. So I appreciate your time. Thank you for considering.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Kidwell Bricks. My wife Jamie and I are the owners of Tank Space at 1110 East A Street. We're also city residents. I want to say thank you to Sean and his staff for all the time that they put into this, and the commissioners for taking the time tonight to review this and ask good questions. I want to talk about a couple of different aspects. As Sean mentioned, we have operated Earth and Ales over in the Commons for just over 7 years now. We opened on kind of the back side of the Commons where there was a decent amount of shenanigans when we first opened. And over the time that we've been there, as there's been more investment in that neighborhood, as there's been more activity, as we've had more of our patrons outside, we've seen less shenanigans. I'm also a recovering urban planner, so this idea of eyes on the street, putting people and activity there leads to safer environments. There's been a lot of conversation about people wandering to the far corners of the district, whatever the boundary may end up being if this happens. I think the majority of the activity that we're going to see are patrons coming into our respective establishments and walking to probably the closest available table out in front and back. There may be some wandering. I'd love to see folks out on the street. I'd love to see more activity at this intersection. I think it has a lot of potential. That's why we're there. But we also want to serve the community. So we're there to be a gathering place. We have one of the neighborhood associations already on the calendar to have one of their meetings. We'd love to do more of that. I want to see more bikes at the bike racks in front. The response in our first 3 weeks has been tremendous. Folks walking and biking from the neighborhoods. So I would love to see this happen. If this doesn't move forward, we will probably pursue some other option for outdoor seating at our establishment. Sean's correct, we don't have an outdoor service area currently. Most likely, if we were to pursue something outside of the social district, that would likely be to the south of our building. It would be kind of hidden from the street. All of that activity and liveliness will kind of get lost. And we'll still have this A Street that's just kind of a car tunnel to move people in and out of downtown. So thank you for your time. I hope you will support this in whatever format it maybe moves forward in, and thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Melissa Hepner. My last name is spelled Hoeppner.
Thank you.
I live on 1010 Lincoln Street, just a block from here. I'd like to preface with saying that I don't know a lot about local liquor laws, though I am familiar with some of them, but I do know a lot about my neighborhood. I've lived there over 25 years, and I am a homeowner. I'd just like to take everybody back about 5 years ago, reimagining the 8th and Garfield corridor. It was just a traffic light area with an abandoned building, the pig in sunglasses painted on the side of it. I'm sure everyone remembers. Not much was happening unless you wanted to do your laundry or have an oil change, all services that I enjoy and use and love in my neighborhood. But along came Oakwood proper, and then Common Good, Cordwood Food Truck, Nomi, Grand Traverse Sauce Company, and just recently Tank Space. This little quarter of TC is experiencing a revitalization similar to what happened in the Nobu district, also a mixed-use district. I am really proud of the businesses in my neighborhood and so excited to see more. Social district in Oakwood area will entice more businesses, in my opinion, to open in the 8th Street Garfield corridor. It will create a greater sense of neighborhood and promote safer drinking culture in the city by encouraging residents to walk and bike to get there, just like I do every time I frequent those businesses. It can also help promote this area by giving it a unique twist that other more prominent and well-known areas, like the downtown that was mentioned, don't have at this point. Thank you for your service to our community and for envisioning new ways to help TC businesses and neighborhoods to change and flourish and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm Jennifer Ewing, and I'm a resident of Oak Park neighborhood. And I've shared my feelings via email, but I also wanted to I was able to get down here, so I wanted to come and share them in person. On face value, I think it's exciting. I've been to Tank Space already. I love having some place to walk to. So all that is good. I think the coupling of the revitalization with the social district is what's problematic. And in particular, for Oak Park neighborhood, it goes into our neighborhood. It is on residential streets. It's on Walnut, where I walk my dog. It's on Michigan, and those are places people live. And so I have a real hard time seeing that and thinking about open carry liquor through the neighborhood. I also was distressed when, and it may or may not be a correct quote, but in the Record Eagle, Mr. Winter's quote is said that the resulting healthy drinking culture plan, because it was focused on downtown, meant we had to look someplace else, meaning let's force unhealthy drinking into the neighborhood because somehow the downtown's protected. And I think that does acknowledge also the concept that this could lead to unhealthy drinking, right? And so I would, again, like to decouple the social district from the revitalization. I think those are separate things, and really take a step back and think about the social district. And in particular, maybe, as Ben pointed out, we could talk to people beyond just the businesses and talk to the people who are living there and maybe get their opinions also. So just wanted to take a moment and thank you and just reiterate what I had sent via email. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Leslie Bilby. I'm a resident of the east side of Traverse City, east of Garfield, and a business owner. I co-own Oakwood Proper Burgers with my husband and own the liquor license associated with. First, I want to thank Sean Winter and his team for putting together quite a lovely presentation. You've really upped your game since I've left the planning department. I don't know what that means exactly, right? I had something prepared that was a little more cogent, but I thought it would be best served just replying to some of your comments. Commissioner Treadwell, trash. As you know, we hand carve our plates out of urban wood. that is recycled wood to be used time and time again. Heaven forbid anybody throw one of those away. But we are very passionate about keeping our neighborhood clean, and we don't like to use a lot of trash ourselves. So that, as you know, we're good stewards. Commissioner Werner, I'm not making light of this, but Oakwood has a healthy drinking culture. For every 100 burgers we serve, we sell 3.4 beers. That's very low, 3.4%. Plus, we close at 7. Commissioner Shaw, since we opened Oakwood Proper Burgers 3 years ago, 7 businesses that I can think of have moved in. That's in 3 years. What if 7 more move in 3 more years? Then we'll have window shopping. Then we'll have an activated street. Commissioner Anderson, thank you for noticing the potholes. I noticed them as well. They were resurfacing 8th Street not too long ago, and I said, why not just fill those too? And our streets department are amazing. But there was a Paisley rating, and apparently it was in such bad condition, it couldn't be done, because it would have to be like a, this isn't my language, it's why I don't work in the planning department anymore, but it would have to all be restructured, all redone. But about that service drive, on a daily basis, several times a day, you will see people U-turn. And I have a unique perspective on it because my building is right there on that corner. People U-turn into the boulevard and nearly hit our building, or people walking by. Blocking it off is actually a very safe thing to do for that little corner building. That was really all that I wanted to say to all of you. Thank you for your time. It's a little awkward for me being on this side of the podium, but I appreciate all your work in studying this social district.
Thank you, Leslie.
Hi there, good evening. My name is Kyle O'Grady, resident of Traverse City. Interestingly enough, people have used timeframes of 3 or 5 years. I actually became a resident of Michigan Avenue about 4 or 5 years ago, so it's been pretty interesting to see. My house is actually just right outside of this photo. What's been taking place over the past 5 years, and it's been, you know, nothing short of fantastic to see, kind of just echoing Leslie's points there. The businesses that are moving into the area, the improvements that have taken place, I think this would contribute in that forward motion for the area, for the residents, for the businesses, for property values, the whole 9 yards. And I appreciate everybody's time spent on this, Sean's presentation on this, and I agree with his sentiments that a rising tide, you know, lifts all ships. So I think this is a positive impact for the community, for the businesses. It's been great to see what's happened over the past 5 years, and I look forward to seeing what's happening in the 5 years to come. And just a fun story, I was sitting at the Oakwood Burger Shop there, actually on Easter, they were open. Thanks for being open on Easter. And I saw somebody driving by and literally smiling and pointing out their window at Oakwood Burgers with the big open sign flashing, and saw them make the turn to make the effort to come there. And I just thought about here at this meeting tonight and being a part of this discussion, you know, how much more that would take place, or how much greater that excitement might be to have these shops, these businesses paired with the designs that were put together, the renders that were put together, that outdoor space, the usability would, I think, just positively increase that excitement. So I'm in full support. I appreciate everybody's great discussion on this here this evening and prior to, and appreciate everybody's time. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
My name is Dennis Prout. I own Prout Financial Design, which is on the corner of 8th and Garfield Street. Excuse me, 1105 East 8th Street. Last name is spelled P-R-O-U-T. Thank you for having this study session. I certainly appreciate it. I want to testify to Oakwood Burgers as well. We had a patty melt Jill and I shared there a while back, and it was incredible. So there you go. As well as Common Good Bakery. It is amazing to me. We've been there since November of 22. What's happening in that area, I couldn't be more excited about the improvements that are being made. However, in the parking lot that's directly in front of us, it is hardscape. I'll just refer to it as that. It's ugly. I don't know how many years ago I drove by and I thought, oh my gosh, that is the weirdest looking parking lot ever. Come to realize that it was Fisher's parking lot for a grocery store years ago to service their grocery store. It's hot there, it's on the south side of the building, and it's noisy. This morning, in fact, we live right in that neighborhood on Woodland. I call it samurai walking, trying to cross 8th Street. Some of the concerns that were raised in terms of if someone is inebriated trying to cross the street, I think it's possible that the city of Traverse City could subject itself to liability because of how intense that traffic is. Obviously, that's going to calm down with a change in Front Street, but I see a problem there with the traffic. Oops, sorry, I just messed that. Okay. In the Holland listing, there were 17 out of 17 businesses that were directly related to movie house, gastropubs, Irish pubs, taverns, coffee bars, and hotels. So the conversations that we're having inside of our office are about people saying, or us having a conversation of, will we have enough money to retire? What about the election? Where do we draw income from? What about Social Security? What about healthcare costs in retirement? There's serious conversations. I would submit that the conversations that are going to happen outside on picnic tables, directly outside of our windows, are directly obtuse to that kind of serious conversation that we're having. We've already actually been speaking with the engineering department about turning all that hardscape into an aquifer, in essence, in planting trees and small shrubs in there to really help improve that neighborhood, and obviously our building, which is that white one right up there on the top left. So I would love to improve that. And
Mr. Prout, thank you. Thanks.
You can finish your sentence. You would love to improve that. You can finish your sentence.
Oh, okay. I would love to improve that and turn that into a type of garden and maybe even include the picnic tables on the end. But I would love to work with the city, sorry, I'm nervous, on improving that
Okay.
really ugly parking lot.
That's actually very welcome. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Matt Tharp. I'm a resident on Washington Street. I will apologize up front. I promise you I'm not intoxicated, but I am recovering from a facial injury, so my speech is a little bit off, so I promise I'll try and keep it as clear as I can. I want to say, you know, at the grander scale, the idea of a social district in the area, we're only a couple blocks away from 8th Street, is a great idea. However, I will say that the breadth and the scope that's been presented tonight is very complex. And it's large in scale. And as a resident, I'm concerned that a plan of that magnitude hasn't been given the proper and due study on what those impacts will be to the surrounding area. Listen, I have no concern for the businesses over there that operate and serve alcohol today. They're fantastic. We love going over there. I'm not worried about them. I am worried when I see a map, though, that cuts through the northern side of Walnut Street, where there are families. There are families that ride buses. That's a fact. That has residential zoning on the north side of the street. You know, but what are the impacts to other parts of the neighborhood? You know, downtown is different. You have the Borden River that cuts the west and the south side that naturally separate the residential areas from the shopping districts, much like we talked about the other social districts. The 8th Street corridor doesn't really have that, which is okay. But what happens as we take away some of the parking and other things? Where are people going to park? They're going to park on the side streets. And I will tell you that people view those stop signs like they don't exist. And it's not going to get better with more cars and more traffic. So I'd like to see this, you know, as you guys consider this, you know, what's the long-term effects? You know, maybe a phased approach. What if this summer we go after the closing these access streets down for the 3 businesses that currently exist and try it out and see what happens for those businesses? Because we want them to succeed, absolutely. But we haven't, I don't think, given enough thought to the larger scale of what happens. The streets will need more repair. 8th Street's taking a beating right now with Munson, which we knew would happen. But the side streets are taking a beating. You have a lot of bicyclists, you have a lot of kids, you have people who walk dogs on the side streets. You know, give that some further study. Maybe we should start small and work our way up. If the corridor extends down 8th Street some further as other businesses apply for liquor licenses, then have them come back in front of the commissioner of the city and take a look at that. Again, I think the idea is a great one. I think it's worth looking at. But I think we need to start small in scale with the businesses there today and figure out how do we incorporate the rest of the neighborhood around it in the plan. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a relationship, right? You have the neighborhood and you have the businesses. We have to find a way to coexist for all of us to be happy. Last thing I want is somebody walking down the street to open beer on someone's front porch on Walnut Street. Not to say that will happen every night, but we need to look at those impacts to the neighbors, look at the residents, and see how do we find a way to coexist. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amelia Jordan. I'm like 75% sure I get extra credit if I make a public comment, so I'm just gonna give it a shot and hope it is worth extra credit. So I'm not I have a different perspective towards this than everybody in here probably, but the Walnut Street section of it, that's really mainly the only road I'm super familiar with, and I know it's super close to the Civic Center, which also means it's less than a mile away from the high school, which I'm not saying that necessarily that's gonna increase alcohol in driving or public walking while intoxicated, but I think that with student drivers and children who are driving, I think having that vast amount of area open to drinking with freely basically in that area could cause some issues. And I also think that within those areas being common places that people go, especially Oakwood and places like that, for kids, in the sense that anybody can just walk around on the public sidewalk with open alcohol, could maybe also cause some issues. But I truly don't have a lot of information on this, and I was just coming up here to maybe get a couple extra points. So thank you, I appreciate it. I think it's a good idea, and I don't know enough about it to argue with you. So.
Well, thank you for that, and we'll make sure that we note on whoever signs it that you did make public comment too.
Good evening, Andrew Raymond, live at 1027 Washington, resident of the city. Actually, our house almost dead ends as in Michigan into Washington, so just a couple blocks away from this. First, just wanted to thank you all for your service. I know how much time and effort you put into it. Thank you to all of the business owners for your investment into this area. As was mentioned, we definitely want this to succeed. We've visited Oakwood several times, Common Good several times. We haven't gone to Tanks Fest yet. Maybe letting the initial, going to say something, the initial buzz of that, no pun intended, wear off a little bit before we go there. I think, as has mentioned several times, the small square, I think, is where I would start. What I would also consider is, was just mentioned, just a vision of what you want this area to be. Consider parking, consider future establishments. So far, all of these areas, or all of the establishments are eateries, but consider, what do you want this area to be? And what do we want this area to be as a community? All of those things that really go into the vision of what you want this space to be. And as far as enforcement goes, the signs probably aren't going to do much. I'd encourage you to come sit on our street and see how much the stop signs work or don't work. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment on this item? Seeing none, we appreciate everybody who showed up and everybody's comments from the neighborhood. I think this was a really great discussion, hearing from both the businesses and the neighbors, and concerns and critiques and suggestions. So that's why we do these study sessions, so we can get that input. So we really appreciate that. As was mentioned, this will be brought back. The soonest it could be brought back would be May 20th to have further discussion on it, possibly put something forward. So we'll keep an eye on that. And I know Sean was over there taking furious notes during public comment as well. So that is much appreciated from everybody. So with that, we will move on to our next item. Just to let everybody know, because I know we have a couple students who need signatures there, this motion will move us into closed session. This is a study session. There is no anticipated action at the end of it. So we will have the motion, we will take final public comment, and then we will sign everybody's papers, and then we will go into closed session. So just wanted to let everybody know kind of the procedure, so nobody's sitting around waiting for us to come back for something that's just going to be me adjourning the meeting, basically. So, all right, with that, we will move on to the closed session portion of our show here. I don't know, do we need any discussion, Lauren, or just ask for a motion?
I don't think so. I sent out a memo previously.
We
So-
don't take a vote at study session.
I'll just take a motion. It's a little, unless there was any discussion needed.
I'll make a motion that the city commission enter into closed session immediately following the public comment portion of the agenda to discuss an attorney-client communication regarding the water system as authorized by MCL 15.268H.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioners Warner and Anderson. This is procedural, so I will call for a vote. All those in favor? Oh, no, roll call, sorry.
Commissioner Anderson?
Pro.
Commissioner Shaw?
Yes.
Commissioner Treadwell?
Yep.
Commissioner Werner?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilson?
Yes.
And Mayor Shamro?
Yes. All right, so that has passed. Moving on now, this is final public comment. If anybody has any final public comment on any item that they want to talk about, you can do so now. I don't think you get double extra credit for 2 comments. I don't know that. Oh, there's somebody back there. Okay.
Tell us what you learned today.
Yeah, tell us what you learned.
Hi, I'm Jace. To be honest, I don't really like this plan, but there are some good things, some bad things. I'm kind of with Amelia on like the student driving because I'm a kid, you know. I know how kids drive. They can be very bad. They can be very distracted. And yeah, so can people that are intoxicated. I just feel like those two really wouldn't mix together very well. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Chase. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah. Going once? All right, everyone, thank you for joining us. We're going to go into closed session right now, but first, anybody who needs signatures, any of us up here can sign. Please feel free, and again, we will not be coming back with any action, so I'll just come back and adjourn. There you go, good job.
We so rarely get public comment from
No,
students.
yeah, exactly.
So rare. It's like
Yeah.
it's been years, so thank you.
Spread the word that they get extra credits.
Yeah, like, I remember prominently at one meeting, a parent of kids was there and.
Entirely different group of people.
Because,
Write a note.
okay, she
I
had
am.
to drive her kid home afterwards.
Yeah, right.
But
Have a good one.
because there was something on the agenda that she felt passionate about.
There you go.
There you go.
Up on Garfield. Yeah, because I'm on the other side of town.
Well,
Yeah.
oh, okay. Oh, well, that's good to know, actually. I always feel better. I always feel like you guys luck out if you get an hour-long one. Says the guy who contributed that. I have to remember I have to sign everything, sorry. There you are. Thank you.
Somewhat. Thanks.
What was your name?
Thank you for talking.
Right.
It's very cool that you guys are doing that. I'm so glad to see you here. Good, thank you. You too. Let's see.
I'm off our place.
Thank you, Mary. Awesome.
Oh, right. I know if you
Hey, Chief.
one of the things I was considering closing that.
Platform. Theirs has to be like in a little fence. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is yours.
Right, and we can, and you guys, you remember how it was.
I get jealous of these, just
Going
like
in
the
there.
vibe they have.
So,
Jackie, you're in the room.
Jackie's here. All right, we now have a quorum. We will now adjourn this meeting. Yes, right. Peasants rejoiced.
Yeah.
I left my bag out here the whole time. So did I, actually. I was at- I also had it here.